Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. If you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Thank you so much for having me. Well, my name is Helene Christensen, and I live in Copenhagen in Denmark, and I work with positioning and messaging strategy, and also helping leaders figure out how to stand out with a very strong story as leaders, facilitating
Awesome.
these changes.
Cool. Well, I'd love to just learn more about your background. Like, what did you do before? How did you get into this business?
Right. It's funny. I was reflecting on that very question. I was just taking my dog for a walk before talking to you. And I did not arrive at this in a straight line in no way. I feel like I've had sort of a zigzaggy career path so far. I started out initially wanting to become a documentary filmmaker when I graduated with my master's back in the day when I was actually living in Seattle. And then some of my first work over there was for video production companies. So I worked for a handful of different companies doing a variety of different things, like huge envisioning projects for Microsoft, and also lots of corporate storytelling for a lot of clients up there, Microsoft, Amazon, that type of thing. And eventually I was like, I'm curious about this whole tech scene I'm in the middle of. So I managed to get my foot in the door of a digital agency, and they were focused around digital design and product development. And at that point, they were owned by Penguin Random House. So they were doing a lot of, digital products, apps, websites, that type of thing for them. Really cool stuff like World of Ice and Fire and cookbooks and Stephen Hawking's universe and that kind of thing. And I did work as a producer, project manager to begin with. And eventually, after doing that for a while, I was like, I don't think this is quite my thing. I don't feel like I'm that kind of, honestly, the person who keeps track of everything. I'm more the idea person or aesthetics person or the strategy person. So I asked them, after I had worked with them for a couple of years, if I could create a new role at the company in their strategy department. And so they did that. And then I started working with content marketing and doing more of that for the agency themselves. And also, got really curious about how to take products to market and do the strategy around that whole thing. That was really enticing for me to peek into that world. And I got really curious about that. And then at some point, lots of things happened. The company got acquired by a big Russian company, and I was not really seeing myself there long term. I also wanted to make the move to go back to Copenhagen. And so I ended up saying goodbye to the company at one point and freelancing for a bit, back at some photography. I was also doing a lot of photography throughout the whole thing. And when I was going back to Denmark, I was like, oh man, how am I going to combine all these things? I love photography. I love the product storytelling, the digital storytelling, really. And then this job pops out of nowhere, a new position at a huge broadcaster that's sort of in a magic way combined everything I love to do, which was really freaky. There was aesthetics, photography. You had to be able to brief photographers. You had to set a visual direction, a strategy, and you had to understand product. You had to understand marketing. You had to understand communication. And it was like, what? This job is tailor-made for me. So basically, I think I went in with that energy coming out of the US after almost a decade with barely any network. And I landed that job, and I was super excited to do that for a while. And then that really was a bunch of positioning work time and time again, because I ended up working with all the, producers, production networks here in Copenhagen and in Denmark in general and the Nordics. And I had to again and again brief them on how we would tell the story of their product when it got to market, because they were, having to figure out how to enter the world of streaming. As silly as it sounds now, I feel like that was still sort of like they were figuring out how to do that compared to handing over their program to a broadcaster that would just air it. So I had to really work that out with them, and that gave me serious skills in terms of how do we make a sharp brief in terms of taking things to market. And I obviously was able to use my skills from prior to that. And then at some point, I became a mom and I had to return to work. And I was like, I don't know if I like going to work every day this way. And I feel like I have an urge I feel like I sort of was able to function a little bit like an entrepreneur within companies for a really long time. And suddenly I was coming back from maternity leave and they were asking me to do all the management. And I was back at the whole, oh man, I don't want to, that's not who I am. So I decided I need to take myself seriously and, pursue this inner calling I think I actually have around building something for myself. Because truly what I'd also been doing at the broadcaster, it's an enterprise organization. I had set up a shop in the enterprise organization. So I'd figured out how to do that and how to really craft, the name around that little shop, build the relationships, and also tell a strong story about what we were delivering to the organization, both internally and also externally, which I think was hugely helpful things to learn. So now I ventured out and I decided to build my own company. And then I decided I wanted to specialize on positioning and messaging. And what I've recently been falling in love with is more, going a step deeper or a layer deeper, and also working on really telling a story about a product that speaks to, a larger vision as to why does this product exist in the world? Because I think we live in this world where there's a lot of stuff going on in SaaS and tech, lots of products coming out all the time, and their ability to differentiate themselves and to really stand out. There are many tactics you can apply. And of course, a strong positioning helps. Great messaging helps. But to take it even further, I think if you have a founder or a leader in that company that's able to, on behalf of the whole organization, articulate why this shit matters, where does it come from? What's the urge to build this thing? Even B2B, I think that really, we should not underestimate the impact it has when you can speak to someone's heart and their humanity or their whatever it is, So I'm really obsessed with that right now. So yeah, that was a longer story, but that's the path basically.
So I guess in terms of who you're working with, what does that kind of look like? Because you kind of just, briefly touched on it. So is it more so tech, SaaS? What's an ideal client for you?
I think I just opened my shop here in February, March. And I set out with the intent to go for SaaS and tech companies. AI, I thought there was a huge opportunity to help them with the storytelling. And I still definitely want to do that. But right now I'm also looking at just in reality, who has come to me to ask for help is, it's more different types of clients than that. So I'm honestly still sort of figuring that out, but I'd really I was aiming also for mid-market level clients, but I think I also would like to at some point get into the enterprise game again. But to be honest with you, I'm still sort of sorting that through myself, but I don't want to exclude the tech and SaaS and AI crowd at all.
For sure.
That's still a very compelling problem to solve, I think.
100%. So when it comes to things like positioning, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you're seeing people make?
Oh boy, where do I start? I think, first of all, just understanding the significance of laying that foundation to start out with is probably mistake rule number one, or whatever you want to call it. I think that's usually, if you don't get that right and you don't take time to really understand who your buyer is, your potential buyer, how is everything else gonna be put together in the right way? How are you gonna prioritize what your product should consist of? How are you going to price that product if you don't know what you're competing up against? How are you going to, target the client if you don't know what messaging will connect with them and what really is the compelling aspects of your product, what's differentiating parts of it? So I think it's such a fundamental, critical aspect of even making a business, making a product, that if you don't, devote serious energy to this, everything else is going to be really difficult. So I think that's the biggest mistake ultimately. But then there are tons of mistakes, after that. I think it's a funny thing. I've looked at a ton of sites, right? Websites, because ultimately I want to help people also do copy for their website. And it's a funny thing to observe the difference between, for instance, a company in terms of how they write about their product on their website and then how they write about it even on their LinkedIn page. Typically, it's different people, I can tell, who are writing this stuff because they're not aligned in how they are describing the product. Or not typically. There are lots of people who are doing a great job. I'm not discrediting the whole field, not at all. But when they are not getting it right, you can tell that there is a discrepancy between how they are describing it on LinkedIn and on their website. And then I'm guessing throughout the whole organization as well. I bet in that case, you have sales saying one thing, you have your marketing team saying another thing, and that really will trickle down everywhere in each department. So it's just a funny thing to, if people are wondering if they are doing that mistake, just walk around, ask different people in your company, what are we actually selling? What's the product? And then see if they're saying something similar. And that's a great indicator to you, because if you're not internally aligned on that, I'm betting your customer has a really hard time getting that.
100%. So obviously that you've worked in both markets, right? You've worked in the European market, you've worked in the US market. What are some of the biggest differences that you see between each market?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You mean in terms of how they approach positioning or working culture?
Yeah, both of it.
Both of them. I don't know if I generalize a lot here, but the startup scene in the US, for instance, and the tech scene, it's like, that's what we are looking to here in Europe still. Like we look to Silicon Valley, we look to the West Coast, that kind of thing.
Right.
And I think there is great resources and role models and leaders that are talking about this. There are great companies in the US that are, there are the people that are the goats of this stuff in the US.
Sure.
As far as I can tell. In Europe, it's different because you're small countries and you're not necessarily, even though we're Europe, you're not necessarily operating on the same market. So I bet you can find local or national experts across different countries. So to me, it seems a little harder to know where to look for that expertise across the entire continent. Whereas in the US, it's just a different scale.
Right.
And culturally, it's hard as well Americans work a lot and they are very, they are bad at taking vacation and bad at prioritizing in a strange way, their individual needs, even though it's a very individualistic country. You're actually very devoted to going to work and like fulfilling that role to a crazy amount of hours, extent. In Europe, where we have a completely different way of life, which honestly also was something I was missing quite a bit when I was living in the US. I really longed for more of a European way of doing things. But I am grateful for my time in the US, and I'm actually really proud to have learned those things the hard American way, because I think it's obviously it's fruitful, right? You produce great stuff.
Yeah, I guess intense for sure. I guess in terms of right now, right? Because you were saying that you kind of launched your company recently in March. What are you most focused on for the rest of this year and just going forward?
I think right now I'm focused on, like I said, I've been really excited about this new pivot I made into focusing on the core narrative or the deep narrative. And I think I am going to focus intensely on promoting that work. It speaks to my heart in a different way than just positioning and messaging. So I'm also trying to figure out a way to be smart about positioning myself. Like what's my gateway to how do I connect with someone and make them understand that they should do this work? And I think it's an interesting angle to talk to more of how do the leader position themselves in terms of facilitating the change they want to create with the product. So I'm trying to figure that out. And I have just over the summer made a workshop that I'm really excited about, that I think is going to be able to really make it click for founders and leaders what I mean when I say that their why or their purpose and their deep belief in why a product should come to market, why that really matters. So I think that's my long-winded answer.
Awesome. So obviously, you've been in this industry for a long time, and also you started your company recently. So if you can share kind of both, right? Like biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew before you were working in this space and also before you launched the company.
You mean biggest piece of advice for someone launching a company or
No,
for...
that you wish you knew, like before you got into this industry of positioning and branding, and also advice that you wish you knew before launching your company.
Yes, I think the biggest piece of advice, I'll start with the last one before launching my own company. And it's going to be the biggest cliche, I'm sure, but it just proves to be true. Everyone says, start before you're ready. Just do it. Don't sit and finesse everything till it's perfect. It's funny. You can hear these things and you're like, yeah, I'm not doing that. I am moving as fast as I can. But in reality, when you look back, at least in my experience, there is still a tendency to sort of hold back a little bit or be, careful, a little trepidatious about like taking the first steps. And looking back now, I just wish I would have jumped even more into things than I did. And I would have been even more just eager and follow that energy and not so, afraid of not being ready really, and it's just if you have this dream, do it, just do it. And I don't think you can hear that too many times, right? And in terms of positioning and messaging, my biggest advice on that, I think for me personally, working, like offering that service and then doing, like trying to position myself as well, is a humbling process. And it is clear to me why it's difficult. And I think the biggest piece of advice I can give is get help. It's really hard work to do this, right? And it's hard to basically see the forest for the trees. You can be so deep into the details and what exactly your process should be and what your client is thinking. Sometimes you need someone to help you take that step back and just get it right, because you can't always do that yourself. You think you can do it. And it's been funny for me to realize that on my own, that, I want to help people with this. I think there is some sort of like principle that I've heard about, that it actually is really hard sometimes to do the work you want to offer other people yourself. But I'm just going to say it takes a group to get it right. And it takes several minds to get in a room together and think this through and ask good questions. And nothing could be more true for me personally than having gone through it myself. So get some help.
Awesome. Well, that's really good advice. If somebody's watching this show and if they wanted to work with you or reach out to you, do you mind sharing your website or social media? I guess best ways to get in contact.
Yes. My website, it's called Exact, EKSAKT.co. And you can reach me on my email. It's Helene, HELENEKSAKT.co.
Awesome.
And
Well,
you're more than
Helene,
welcome to reach out. Yeah.
awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for talking to me.